So today, Amy-Beth Rice is going to share insights on crafting professional artist statements and bios. Originally from the Ozarks, Amy-Beth has a Bachelor of Fine Arts in drawing and a Master of Arts in teaching from the Memphis College of Art. Her work is known for its focus on color, whimsy, and movement, and has been featured in solo and group exhibitions across the Midwest and Mid-South. Amy-Beth is passionate about arts education and has conducted community mural workshops and artist talks in multiple states. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and say hello again. Welcome, Amy-Beth Rice.
Thank you, Victoria. Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for your flexibility too. If you had joined before we moved the date, I did not have a voice, so due to a virus. So I'm really happy to, first of all, have my voice and also to be here with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint here. There we go. Okay. So we're going to be talking about three different elements that are required for this fellowship: the artist statement, the bio, and we're going to mention a little bit about the impact statement as well. So we're going to start with the artist statement. I wish I could see all of you while also talking. I wonder if I can do that. There's a bunch of windows. There we go. I can see a few of you. Um, so how many of you already have like a working artist statement that you've used for anything else, whether it's like something you've put on a website or social media, or anything that you have that already exists that has something? Okay, cool, a couple of you, that's good. So um of course, the statement and the bio, those are like living documents that you want to have different versions of depending on where you are in your life. And of course, in your work, your interests are going to change over time. So I recommend having one, just some text, like one that's already written, but you'll end up having some different versions of it at different points in your life as your work changes, as your life changes. Even listening to my own bio be read by Victoria, I'm like, oh, I need to update some things and kind of shift some things. So it's not like a one and done situation when you're writing your statement and bio. And it'll be different too based on the purpose. So what you put in your social media bio is going to be really different from what you have on your website versus what you would have up in a press release or an exhibition versus applying for a grant or a fellowship. So the statement, that should be strictly about your work. And there are different types of statements. So sometimes it'll be a statement for a body of work that you've created, and that's appropriate for like an exhibition or press release. In this context, unless you are making a body of work that you feel like the fellowship would specifically apply to, and that's more where your impact statement is going to be connecting, this will be more of an overall statement about your work as an artist. So the statement is about your work, the bio is about you. So that's more about your journey as an artist. And Carolyn, did you have a question, or are you just holding your hand up? Oh, okay, just relaxing. Okay. So like I said, both of these change according to the context and the audience. So the audience will dictate the length as well. So when I said have multiple versions, like I would write one and then have like a sentence. So how many of you have been in like a social situation where you introduce yourself as an artist and they're like, oh, what kind of work do you make? And you're like, I do photography. And they're like, oh, what are your photos of? And you're like, and it's like you just kind of go blank. So the artist statement is the place where you process that. So you want to have like a sentence that, whether you're being interviewed or it's on social media or in conversation, you have like a quick sentence or two that you can say to people that pretty much summarizes what kind of work you're making. And then for For other contexts such as this one to two paragraphs is good, because you want to be surgical. Partly because the selection committee that reads these, I imagine they read like hundreds, right? And so you want to cut out anything that isn't directly relevant or isn't really helping them understand who you are as an artist or understand your work better. Um, so having a sentence, having a paragraph or two paragraphs for different reasons. For this context, one to two paragraphs is good. Okay. All right. So the statement, think of it as like if no one has ever seen your work before, like whether you're meeting them just in the moment or this is a fellowship and they haven't opened your portfolio or whatever sort of work that you've submitted, the statement is carrying the weight of your work when you are not in the room and when it is not in the room. So that's a really heavy thing for just a paragraph to do, which is why you want to be so surgical with it and intentional with every sentence and each word. But the basis for a statement is just what, why, and how. So, what are you making? What kind of art is this? And be as specific as possible. Why are you making it? And then how are you making it? So that's your process. Okay. So, and we're going to look at some examples here in a little bit to kind of help you understand a little bit better what those different things can look like. So like I said, the statement is just about your work. So your bio is your journey. So anything that's like more personal to you, like how long you've been an artist, or where you grew up, or what made you want to be an artist. Those things you want to reserve for your bio. So the statement is just your work itself. So some things you want to include and think about: the materials, tools, instruments. So how are you making the work? What are you making it with? Are you a photographer? Are you a choreographer? Are you a musician? Are you a visual artist? So, and not just the materials, but think about how do the materials connect to why you're making the work? Why did you choose these materials? Why did you choose this medium? So before you really just sit down to write out your statement, try to think about why you're doing what you're doing. What is inspiring you? And I'll have some exercises for you to help generate those ideas too. Next thing you want to think about is your subject matter. So if you think about your work as a body, it's normal for us to be trying different things and experimenting and for your work to change. I think that that's like the marker of someone who's growing and is healthy in their practice. However, if you're writing like a general artist statement, think about, all of it's coming from you and your lens, if you will, and your experiences. So there needs to be, try to think of something that generally connects your work as far as subject matter. And if it's too broad, like if you've been making work a long time and you can't really find like a thread through the whole thing, try to think about the work you're making right now. Is if that's where you place your identity as an artist and what you're making right now, think about what subject you're exploring right now as an artist. So with subject, you also want to think about like cultural influences. So is there a bigger, like at the bottom it says larger cultural connection? Where does your work fit within a historical context? Are there any themes or motifs that keep coming up in your work? So, like, for example, if you are a painter, maybe you're a figurative artist. Maybe you are drawn to painting the figure. So think about what that subject is, but then also connect it to why. Why are you drawn to that? And then your process. Are you using found objects? Are you what is the meaning behind your process? Why are you choosing to create that way? Maybe if you're a photographer, part of your process is scouting out a location. Maybe the location is really important. So think about the elements in your personal work that are significant, what makes them significant. So the what, the why, and the how. And then generally, An artist statement, I like writing mine in first person, and because it feels more personal, it feels more conversational, but you can write them in third person as well. I've seen both. It's really just comes down to preference. Okay. All right, so some things not to include or to keep for your bio. So speaking about like anything regarding yourself or your life, like your childhood or seasons of life, keep that for your bio if it's relevant to your work. The number of years you've been creative, also keep that for your bio if it's relevant, to who you are as an artist. Why you wanted to be an artist, so that sort of thing. Keep that in your bio. For both your bio and your statement, you want to be confident in your language, especially when you're applying to a grant or a fellowship. The selection committee is trying to, you want to paint a picture of yourself and what could be possible, like what they're investing in. So avoiding language like I hope to, I try to, I aspire to. So be confident in your language. And I would also say take away like too many adverbs, or any extra wording that you don't need, just because it can weaken a statement. So, for example, I'm sure you guys have seen this just in writing or in like high school, where you could say, I'm very happy. Like words like very can kind of weaken the statement. Instead, you could say, I'm elated, or use a word that's more specific as opposed to using the word very or another adverb. Also, now, if this is the way you speak, then by all means, but generally, you want to avoid using like super academic language, where it's like you're trying to use like the jargon or the most flowery sounding word. And I think as artists, like sometimes we can be insecure in what we're doing. And so I think the effort behind that is coming from like I have to convince people that I know what I'm doing, that I'm intelligent, and really sell people on the work I'm making. And I think that there's roots of that feeling that we have kind of just in the way arts and our culture has kind of been pushed to the side in the broader conversations a lot of times. So it kind of creates this feeling of like we have to, especially in art education, I know like some of the standards we have that we had to teach in public education, it was like, why is this worded like this? And I do think that it's like we sometimes feel like we're having to prove ourselves. Um, but the more
That is
simple,
what I got to do.
oh, sorry, someone came unmuted.
Yeah,
Um,
boy, look at the boy.
but the more straightforward you can and concise you can be, because the goal is to communicate. Let the work speak for itself, but your goal in your statement and your bio is to be like really clear. You're just painting a picture for them. So also avoid making like sweeping general statements in both your bio and your statement. So like saying music is my life or all my life I've been making art, because that doesn't necessarily tell us something specific to you. I can say I'm an artist and teacher, but I also work for Contemporary Arts Memphis, and it's a fellowship for teenagers and for juniors and seniors. And we just graded our applications last weekend, and we had about 60 some that we had to go through. And the responses, they can be really general. So, and you kind of end up reading the same thing over and over. So you don't want to get lost amongst a bunch of other statements. You want to be, and you're already unique. I think the key here is expressing very clearly what makes your work and what makes you different. So you want to avoid those sweeping general statements. Let me see if I have any other examples in my notes. Um, Art is my life. It's what I love. So instead of saying that, just be specific about what you're doing. That's going to speak for itself, I promise. Okay. There's actually this phrase in journalism that says, it's get the name of the dog. So this is a quote from one of my sources. You always get the name of the dog, the editor explained. The dog is a character in the story, and names tell readers a lot about your characters. So whenever, like, instead of saying, rather than stating you're like a mixed media artist, Explain that you use encaustic techniques that are constructed with found objects that are mounted on wood panels. So instead of, saying I use, and, as I said, I listened to my own bio a few minutes ago. I was like, oh, I need to change a couple things because I feel like I'm better at this than I was a couple years ago when I wrote that. So be specific, name the materials, name the techniques, name what you're doing, because again, that's part of what makes you unique. That's part of what makes you stand out from other artists. And it helps paint a picture. Okay. Did I miss one? No, okay. Okay, so here are some exercises that you can do if you don't have a statement yet. I know, and this is the same for me too, and I feel like my students are like this as well. Sometimes when we make work, whether it's music or, painting or photography, dance, it's coming out of like an intuitive space a lot of times, right? It's not like you necessarily every single time sit down and you write about, I'm about to make a body of work, there will be 7 paintings included. You don't usually start out with that level of specificity. If you do, that's really cool. But I feel like most artists are creating out of more of intuition. And so we have to kind of process after the fact, at least I do. So process your content and ideas about your work. One exercise you can do is record yourself talking about your work with a friend. I've done this with people and with students, and it's super helpful because if the person, keeps asking you like, why did you create that? Or if you're just allowing yourself to talk, even if you're by yourself, just in front of one of your pieces or listening to something you've created, and just allow yourself to talk about it and keep asking yourself why, and allow yourself to pause. This isn't a performance, it's informal. And so I think your thoughts are organically going to come out, and then you can listen back to that and type it up and pull out the pieces that you feel like are relevant. Another exercise that I feel like this is my favorite that I use, is just a brain dump. So I'll open up a document, or I like to write things out before I type them. There's something, that's like the first thing we learn to do in kindergarten a lot of times, is write. So there's something, it feels like I've been doing it longer than typing. So just dump out in your mind, get all your thoughts out. And it doesn't have to be pretty, more just like stream of consciousness style. Let yourself type out everything. Try and push yourself to type out all the details. Then go back, circle or highlight the parts you're like, okay, yes, this is about my work. This is a key element. This is a material I'm using. This is why I'm doing it. This is how I'm doing it. And, this is what ties it all together. So I feel like that's really useful, especially if you're typing it or you type it up, because then you can just copy and paste it together, and you have something you can edit with. Another exercise you can do is, if the stream of consciousness feels intimidating or you just don't like that, keywords. So just start by making a list of keywords, or ask a friend how they describe your work. You'll be surprised sometimes what they'll say. Or if you ask enough friends, you'll start to hear a pattern, even if they're not artists. Creativity and art making is, I believe it's inherently human. And so even if someone doesn't have an arts education or they're not an artist, they can pick up on things about your work, just intuitively, that you can start to see a pattern from what people say. So you can take that and make a list of adjectives or ideas. Or so for me, it might be portraits or color, movement. Let's see. So, just continue listing those. And then you can take those and turn them into sentences and start to rough them out. Okay. Okay. So here is an example. So this is from a website that I found that has a ton of really good resources. And they have like a whole lecture on there about writing art statement. The website is artprof, like professor. So artprof, artprof.org. And so there's a bunch of like art ed resources and artist resources, from a professor who designed the website for her students primarily. So this is like a statement that someone had given the professor, and you can see she's editing it. So the pink is the things she said to add, and you can see where the line has crossed things out. So if we read it before any of the editing, the top sentence, and you can see it's like broken into two. So that top sentence could really function as, something you could put in social media, or something you could say in a, I know it's a little hard to see, it's a screenshot, I'll read it for you guys. But the top one, that could be what you say in conversation. The bottom part goes into more detail. So without any editing, I use ballpoint pen, painting, monotype, a variety of media in signature ways to explore the power of light to alter our, it looks like there is maybe more that was taken off. So ballpoint pen, if you look at her work, which we don't have access to it, but she wasn't just using a ballpoint pen. There was like a certain type of mark making that she was using. So again, being specific in your process. So the edited version, I use unique mark making in ballpoint pen, painting, and monotype. A variety of media is a little bit too broad. So instead of saying a variety of media, she's already saying ballpoint pen, painting, and monotype. So we don't need to add that it's a variety of media because we have a variety right there in a signature way. So instead of saying in a signature way, we added unique mark making, right? To explore light's ability, so we took out the power of light because we're already talking about light having an ability, which is power, right? To explore light's ability to alter our physical and emotional experiences of the world. And then we took out external and internal landscapes. So we don't, anything you don't need that isn't really adding to the sentence, you can get rid of it. And at the bottom it says, I'm captivated, as opposed to fascinated, by the evolving atmosphere that light creates around storms and nightscapes as metaphors for emotional states. I use a range of media and distinctive application methods to connect external and internal landscape. Nuanced scenes emerge of an event that is either about to take place or just happened. I use ballpoint pen, archival ink, monotype, and painting. Let's see, to the breadth of atmospheric dynamic marks and translucent light. The landscapes are traceable imprint of this exploration. So there's a lot that was cut out of there, and you can see the notes on the side where where the professor says be more specific about the media. So the highlighted parts where it's yellow, those are connected to a comment on the side. And if you want a copy of this, Victoria, would I be able to email this to you if anyone wants it?
Sure thing.
Okay,
Definitely.
cool. I know it's a little hard to see and someone might want to study it a little bit further.
And I did find the website that I can share in the chat as well.
Yeah, it's on there too, so that's perfect. That'll give you more info. So here you really get an example of how specific you need to be and some of the words that you don't need or information you don't need to include, and how surgical you want to be. So let's move on. Okay, so let's read this, and I want you guys to tell me either in the chat or if you want to come off or raise your hand if this is a strong statement or not. My artwork integrates bodily, intercultural, live encounters and engages subjectively the effects of different discourses in contemporary electric, robotic technoscience. What do you guys think? Let me open the chat. I haven't looked at it. Right, elevator talk. I'm just seeing the chat. Okay, Angie says she's gonna. Too much jargon, Lauren says. Yeah, exactly. So just like we talked about, yeah, too wordy. Do we even know what they're talking about? Too academic, exactly right. So this doesn't give us a picture, like a visual image in our minds of what their work is. So it helps, like, read your statement out loud. Also give it to somebody who doesn't make art. Or who's a creative, maybe a little familiar with art, so they might know some of the terms, and ask them, does this make sense? and ask them what they think. That can help a whole lot. Let's look at another one. Yeah, too much art speak. That's right, Carolyn. Is this a strong statement? And how could it be changed? So my areas of investigation evident in the work include psychoacoustic phenomena, sonic environments, sound synthesis, telecommunications, and noise. So I think, we can agree this is also too much jargon, too many words. So what could you say instead? Like, how could you simplify this to make it a stronger, more accurate statement? Because obviously, like, if you're making this kind of work, it looks like it includes a lot of different sound elements. Maybe what's just like a simple way everyone could understand what you're trying to communicate? Simplify each of the big word sections. Yeah, you could definitely do that, Morgan. So you could just, find another word that simplifies these. You could also, like, as simply as possible, you could say, I'm a sound artist, or I work with sound, and then say how and why, as just a simple sentence. Okay. What about this one? What do you guys think? My studio practice uses drawing, printmaking, sculpture as means toward exploring the extremes of human emotion, using the human figure and face as a vehicle for expression. What are y'all's thoughts on that one? Could it be improved in any way? Is it solid?
So I think it's pretty solid. I guess what they could go into afterward is what those extremes are.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a thought that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be the place to expound. And just like we saw a couple slides before this, instead of saying drawing, printmaking, and sculpture, like that is a variety of media. You could get a little more specific. You could say I use graphite, um, and etching. So you can again get the name of the dog, right? To be even more specific. But I think this one's pretty solid. Okay, we're gonna skip that. Okay, so the bio. This is about your journey. I feel like this one's easier to write than the artist statement, because the artist statement, you have to really ask yourself, questions about why you're doing what you're doing and how everything connects. Whereas the bio, this is pretty straightforward. This is about your life and your experiences. It's not a place to be poetic, or like show your personality as much. It's really just to name and list like who you are as an artist. So it succinctly summarizes your background, education, any achievements, influences, providing context for your practice. So you want to include any relevant information about education, exhibitions, that sort of thing. Okay, so usually this one's written in third person. You can write in first person. I typically like my artist statement to be first person so it feels more conversational for whoever's reading it, whereas the bio is more usually third person. 1 to 2 paragraphs, sometimes 3, if you've had a long career, I guess, but 1 to 2 is good. So introduction, education, achievements, and influences. And you want to keep all the things that we talked about as far as writing for the statement. So like not using overly academic language, being concise, not making sweeping general statements. All of those apply to the bio as well. Okay. So let's look at a couple examples. I This one I feel like is pretty strong. So Dane Gray Rogers is an author based in Brooklyn, New York. So we know where they work, with over 10 years experience. So that's okay to put in here. Be specific though, as opposed to saying all my life or since childhood. 10 years experience in short story writing and poetry. So again, be specific about, what it is you're doing. Several media outlets offered praise for his debut poetry collection, Family Dinner, again, naming a specific work for its honest depiction of Gray Rogers' childhood and struggle with addiction. Rogers values truth and relatability in his work and dedicates his career, so that's subject, dedicates his career to the representation of non-traditional families. So that's one sentence dedicated to kind of what their work is about. Those who are interested can learn about more on their website. And for this context, you don't need to include like where your website is because they'll already have access to that information. But going back, you might, if you have, if you've ever had a show or you've been mentioned like in on a website somewhere or anything like that, if you have like if you've had a long career and you have a lot of those things, try to narrow it down to like top 3 achievements or things you can mention. Okay, let's see. So here's some examples of what not to include. And this was kind of a funny article I found called Art Narc. It's Art Narc Bad Artist Statements. And their commentary was really funny. So if you want to look it up and read the full article, you can. But these are a few I picked out that I feel like I read a lot in artist statements that you want to avoid just because they're overly general. So I love art. For me, it is a way of life or a way to live. So everyone, all artists feel that way to some extent. I don't think we need to convince anyone of our passion for art or how important it is to us. You want to be more specific about what the art is or what you've done and how you've grown as an artist in your bio. Painting is my real life's path. Again, it doesn't necessarily add to like, let your experiences or the way you speak about your work do the talking for you, as far as convincing someone of that. I believe we can see beautiful art everywhere we look. I feel like you could use that sentiment, but maybe rework it a little bit to, be more specific, like, where are you looking? What sort of beauty are you looking for? That kind of thing. Her works are found in private collections and some of the most famous museums in nations throughout the world. In this case, if they're really famous museums, name them, or name the collections if they're really big names that people would recognize, or even if they're not, like it's really cool to be in somebody's collection. So like if you've sold work or you've had a client that's a notable client, I think that's an important thing to put in here. And if it's someone who, like an individual maybe who's more private, it never hurts to reach out and just get them to give you the okay to mention that in your bio. His work reflects, reacts to, and collects emotions and situations. What emotions? What situations? So again, just being more specific. Impact statement. I don't have examples of these, but I did want to touch on it just a little bit. So an impact statement articulates the potential significance of an artist's work for specific opportunities. So you're wanting to demonstrate the value and the relevance. Yeah, hang on. Okay, so tailoring a statement. So the writing tips that I gave for the statement and bio also apply here. And you want to surgically remove anything that doesn't help paint that picture. And I would go to the Mississippi Arts Commission website and just review like, what's the criteria? What are they looking for? And read your statement. Ask yourself, am I demonstrating that? Am I painting that picture for them in my impact statement? I have the first fellowship I ever applied to, me and my closest friend when I was getting my BFA also applied to it. And where my approach, I was wanting to go to the Czech Republic and study performance art. And I had this packed schedule that I was talking about in my application. I was like, I'll go to this festival. And they do have a really great culture for performance art in the Czech Republic. And so I was like, I'll go to this festival and I'll do this and I'll go to this gallery. But my friend Kelsey Wyndham, she's a great landscape painter. She got it because she was like, I need to know what the light and the Mediterranean is like. You know, if you've ever studied painting or landscape painting, you may have heard that the light in the Mediterranean is very unique, and it impacted a lot of artists who are creating. And so what you want to do when you're writing your impact statement, you need to convince the selection committee that there's a goal that you have, or there's something that you are doing, that this part, you know, if they're able to give you this support, that would allow you to accomplish this. And the thing you're trying to accomplish is valuable because, you know, how does it impact the arts? How does it impact you? Like, what growth will you be able to have with this support? So think about, is there a specific goal? You know, is there a show? Is there a piece of equipment? Is there something tangible that, you know, because every artist would benefit from additional support, right? So we're not unique in that. Everybody can say, this would help me grow as an artist. This would help me purchase more materials. What materials? To what end? So you want to be specific in your impact statement too. Really paint the picture of how this is going to benefit you as an artist in a very tangible way. And then also think, like, how does that benefit the arts too? Because this is the Mississippi Arts Commission, right? So they're kind of in charge of delegating how those resources go to artists who are really engaged in growing as artists, which ultimately impacts the culture in Mississippi, right? One last note about, and this could be kind of controversial, using AI tools. This is super new for most of us, but I've been experimenting with Chat GPT, and I know you don't want to use any AI tools to actually write anything for you. Like, if you think about the way an AI voice sounds, you know, like in narrating a video, it doesn't sound human, right? It's like, good morning, duh, 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 you know, like Alexa or something. That's the way the writing also sounds if you allow it to write for you. Um, However, it can be useful in helping you create an outline or some structure. So, like, if you do one of those exercises I described where you like dump your brain into a document and then you have like a couple pages of writing, you can take that, go to chatgpt.com. It's free, you know, if you have a Google account, a Gmail account, and then say, literally say, can you take all these ideas and put them into an outline for an artist statement? And it'll take your ideas that you wrote as the artist and just formulate a structure that could work, you know? And you can take it and say, okay, I'd rather move this around here or move that around there. And so it's kind of like, you know, if any of you paint, you know, sometimes you might start by covering up the canvas with an underpainting or toning it. That's kind of the way that I think about using AI tools. It's like, if you're scared of just the white paper or the white document and not sure what to type, it helps you cover it up just to have something to work with. And then you can go back and be like, well, that doesn't sound like my voice. Let me change this, right? So you want to maintain their personal voice and your authenticity because that's what makes you unique as an artist. Okay, so these are a couple of, so that article I mentioned that had like the bad artist statements that was kind of funny, that's on glasstire.com, so you can find that, and then artprof.org. So those are two things I looked at just to get some of these resources. Okay, let's open it up for questions. And let me pull y'all out so I can see everybody. So you're welcome to ask questions in the chat, or raise your hand. The chat might be easier. It'll take a few minutes here. Excuse me.
Okay, well, I had kind of a thought about length. So I think you mentioned the amount of applications that reviewers, we call them panelists, the people that review the applications, that they're reviewing a lot. And I think, you know, what are your thoughts on, you know, a whole like page of writing versus like something that's like much shorter and, that aligning with the capacity to read and understand that these panelists are really sort of like stretching as they go through all the applications.
Yeah, thank you. I was in that situation over the weekend. I think longer statements like those are appropriate for solo exhibitions, or having it next to your work in a show. But if you think about how long panelists have to go through all the applications, like, we don't have a lot of time. So you really want that, to have a paragraph. If you can keep it to like about a paragraph or two at the most, that's the sweet spot, because even within the first couple sentences, you want to have kind of like that, almost like a thesis statement, like we were looking at in that one that was edited, this one. So like that first statement, you want to be really, tell us exactly what you're doing. Be really specific so that it can hook us in. You know how in high school, I feel like a lot of classes that taught us how to write essays, it's like start with your broad idea and then funnel it down. I feel like you actually want to turn that upside down. So start with a really specific idea. Start with something like, this is what I do, this is how, this is why, in one sentence, like a thesis statement, and then start to kind of build it out and expound a little bit in the next few sentences, and let that be that. And then let your work, you're submitting your work to this, so they'll see or listen, or whatever media you have. So thank you for your question. If we don't have any other questions, we'll conclude. If I have received the fellowship twice, should I mention this? Will this be, I don't think it's a negative personally. I think it speaks to you're like, that's an award. So that's really cool that you've received it twice. I would put that in your bio, because it's a significant career milestone and achievement that you've had. Well, Victoria might have a different thought on that, but I think it would be good to include.
Yeah, I think so as well. And I guess it also brought up another point that's sort of unique to our fellowship application is so for our artist bios and statements, we ask everyone to just be anonymous. So refer to themselves as like the artist, he, she, just so the panelists are really like focusing on what's being written, what's being shown in the work samples. So yeah, that I just wanted to bring up that very unique aspect of our fellowship application.
For sure. Thank you. Okay. Um, well, thank you guys so much for having me. If you want to connect, I manage the Instagram for CAM Summer Fellowship. It's a organization founded by Derek Forjor. And so I'd love, if you're interested in what we're doing, some teens in the area, I post artists every week. So you're welcome to follow that. That's my personal account, Amy-Beth Rice. So I'd love to connect with you there if you're on Instagram. Thank you, Victoria, for posting that. Yeah, so you're welcome to connect with me. I love connecting with artists. I love Mississippi as well. So thank you guys so much for having me. I can send the PowerPoint if you'd like.
Yeah, and so I've got the emails for everyone that's registered. We can share if you wanted to send it to me, Beth, I can send it to everyone that's registered, and we'll try and get this recording set up so folks can access it soon. But yeah, I've got all y'all's emails, so I will email y'all about that as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Victoria. You
Thank
guys have
you.
a happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amy-Beth.
All right.
All right, we'll go ahead and end it.
All
Have
right.
a great
Take care.
day.
You too.